Hello everyone, this is Casper Raptorial, and I'm sorry I haven't made videos recently in the last couple weeks. My computer's data storage got full. I had to spend quite a few days emptying it, had a lot of other things to catch up on. I had an employment workshop to go to, and then set up a meeting with an employment specialist later this week, as well as a lot of helping out with pre-holiday events and plans with the Natural History Museum I'm a part of. And a couple weeks ago I gave my volcanoes and supervolcanoes presentation to the Geological Society, which was very well received, and I will upload a version of that for YouTube when I get around to it. Things are moving very fast, of course, as they have throughout this entire year, particularly this fall. Doesn't it seem like all over the West we just have crisis after crisis just forced upon us so fast that we can barely deal with one before we have to address the next one? Is to distract us from plans going on behind the scenes, including the one that we're going to talk about tonight. The United Nations Global Compact for Migration, for safe and orderly migration, and regular, which means unending, that the United Nations is forcing Western countries to adopt. Now, a number of them have pulled out. The United States under President Trump. Thank God we elected President Trump in 2016. Do you really think that Hillary Clinton would have put up any resistance against it? She would have welcomed it with open arms. How would she have dealt with the migrant caravan invasions coming up from Central America? She would have just opened the borders. In fact, a lot of people from Central America have been saying exactly this, that they were eagerly awaiting the promised Hillary Clinton to be elected, and were waiting for the borders to open. She talked about doing exactly that in the presidential debates, and that was what woke up a lot of Americans to the fact that their sovereignty was under serious attack. That's why we needed Trump. Not for Trump to be some grand moral sage for us all, but to protect the country. Now, of course, after the Democrats lost the presidential election in 2016, they did not take a step back and take a look at what they did wrong. They absolutely refused to accept that they did anything wrong, that they alienated everyone, even though they really alienated a portion of everyone. Barack Obama was traveling to the black community saying, you must vote for who I say to vote for, because I'm black, you're a traitor if you don't. Well, that's really not respecting the idea that they can have minds of their own now, is it? And Hillary Clinton did the same thing with women. It's extremely irritating, because it's not how conservatives treat different groups of people. We treat them based on their actions, whether, treat individuals as individuals, judge them based on their actions, but you also can't escape the reality that there are patterns to how different groups of people, different demographics, act and vote, and their values and their beliefs. When you look at the larger groups, there are very real patterns. And what people coming out from the third world tend to do, they tend to bring a lot of illnesses, a lot of crime. When Donald Trump said that many of the people coming up from Central America and Mexico are criminals, he never said they all were. Said these countries are not sending their best. And I mean, really, these countries are assisting each other in sending people who will move to America and other Western countries. I mean, third world countries all over the world are doing this, sending their people to Western countries so they will send money back to the third world countries, and they just keep the floodgates open, sending in more people to establish their own little communities in these Western countries and gradually take them over. This is happening all over the world, except in countries that have decided to put a stop to it. Japan is not a Western country, but it is very Western adapted while keeping its own cultural identity, which, Japan's culture does have a few problems, but that is for them to address. It is not for any other country to force them to address. And you can also say the same of any country to another. You cannot force the country you're traveling to or moving into to change. I mean, even if you want to, and even if they want to be changed, although why, who knows, it's very difficult. Because people, once they reach a point where they're set in their habits, they are very hesitant to change, and it's almost impossible. And so you also can't force people to change based on what you want, but the European Union and the United Nations are trying to do exactly this by putting together this global compact for migration to make any opposition, any questioning, any criticism of migration, or really invasion, government-assisted invasion, which means the governments taking part in this are betraying their own people. Let's just call it what it is, because there's so much bullshit. I really don't have the energy to say it any other way but the short, simple, and true. It's government-assisted invasions. So this United Nations Global Compact, and you can read the document yourself. I'll provide a link in the description below. It is quite lengthy. It's like 36 pages. I'm printing out 12 at a time to read. Haven't even gotten to as much as I printed out, but Stefan Molyneux has a very good video on the breaking down of it analytically. I'll also provide a link to that, as well as to Computing Forever's videos, which are also very good. This document is a pact to be signed in Morocco in December 2018, well, this year. Says now, why are they having the meeting in Africa? That's very strange, considering the condition that Africa is in. It's, along with the Middle East, one of the worst places for acknowledging human rights, which, it's so funny. These Middle Eastern and African countries have just massive rates of child abuse, child rape of a huge number of women and children. Africa particularly very high in the spreading of the AIDS, really because rape is uncontained. Horrible treatment of their own people, and particularly of anyone who doesn't look and think like them. So it's so funny to... Well, it's not funny. Hypocritical is the word. But I think everyone's already aware of that. To hear the UN talk about migration being a human right, when a lot of these migrations are bringing in people from areas with the worst violations of human rights and decency towards fellow humans in the world, if not the greatest. The signing will take place about a week from now, actually. I think on the website it lists for the 10th to the 11th. is the Made in America. I've also heard it will go into full effect on the 18th. I cannot verify that. But this is the signing of a document put together by the United Nations. Angela Merkel being one of the who has completely destroyed Germany. And it's this weird hatred of Germany. It's this post-World War II hatred of Germans, holding, or of Germany, the country, as a whole, of holding them, of holding generations born long after accountable for atrocities done. Then it's ridiculous. I don't understand it, but it's one of the leading motivations between, not between, behind Angela Merkel's destruction of Germany, among whatever else she has in that twisted, sadistic head of hers. But let's talk about what the stated goal of this compact is. The words in this document translate into concrete actions for the benefit of millions of people in every region of the world. The problem is, and I suppose I could say I'm sorry that this is the case, but since governments tend to corrupt and defile everything they get their hands on, and the United Nations is government-like, and it's actually trying to become an empire with its crackdown on any criticism of its actions, which is exactly what tyrannies do, exactly what fascist regimes do. It's just trying to be globalist rather than nationalistic. Some degree of nationalism, some pride in your own culture, your own heritage, and not letting in other people seeking to destroy that is a good thing. Like everything else, it can be taken to the extremes, but what we're now seeing is globalism taken to the extremes without even any acknowledgement of the problem, the realistic problems it brings. There's this very strange just refusal to accept that different groups of people, the world, have different priorities, that they don't think the same, that they are not all the same, holding hands and dancing around the world together, everyone respecting each other. It's not mutual. And unless you understand that, unless you acknowledge that, and face up to that, however unfortunate it might be, you're setting yourself up to be exploited and eliminated. The experiment that everyone will just get along is it's a complete failure. I'm sorry to say. Sometimes experiments fail. It happens, and when they do, you just gotta try something else. Globalism will collapse. It will actually destroy everything. We should talk about... I did make one video introducing resource management. I'll continue those conversations. So I don't feel guilty at all, really, saying that the only countries that seem to be surviving are the ones that have gone more isolationist and less globalist. The United States, Poland, Russia, and Australia, for example, have stopped welcoming just anyone and everyone with open arms. And they are, at least for now, still standing while Europe and Africa and Central America are falling apart. Countries like Ireland and Sweden, their native populations are very fast becoming the extreme minority, very quickly. And the populations who are becoming a majority are, though, among those seeking to destroy the West. We will see how Brazil will fare under Jair Bolsonaro, who is a more conservative leader than Brazil has had for a long time, and it's about time. if you live in Brazil, you should really be spending this time trying to contact Bolsonaro and ask him to withdraw from this compact if he has not already done so. You really need to. Please, Brazil, don't become Venezuela. You are just beginning to see the hints of a real future again. Please don't blow it. This Global Compact for Migration is the first ever UN global agreement on a common approach to international migration. Wildly irresponsible. It's non-legally binding, but what it's doing is setting a precedent for future compacts to become binding. It's about setting up the first. It's the first step into the UN creating another one, then another, and another, becoming more and more official until there's no possibility of fighting it. So fight it now. It also says it is grounded in values of state sovereignty, responsibility sharing. Ironic, coming from people who don't understand resource management and responsibility to their own people at all. Non-discrimination, oh boy. How many times has that been abused? I've lost count. And human rights, yeah. Importing people from the worst human rights violations in the world. And recognizes that a cooperative approach is needed to optimize the overall benefits of migration while addressing its risks and challenges from people who don't understand what that means at all, for individuals and communities in countries of origin, transit, and destination. So what, is this like a worldwide train that's just going to go from country to country? I mean, no, I'm just trying. It sounds in this paper like they intend for people to just be traveling country to country to country to country their entire lives. It's just, what? And all these words, these compassionate sounding words, that's all they are. They're just feel-good sentences. But the problem is no one has any real idea of how to go about any of this peacefully. If you read the document, and it does take a while to read, there's no real plan of how to put this into effect that would be, in any sense of the word sustainable. In the past several years, many European countries under the authority of the EU or European Union let in gigantic waves of third world migrants. And the first question is, has Europe experienced this mass migration peacefully? Not at all. In fact, Europe is barely recognizable as Europe anymore, apart from a couple of countries like Poland and Russia who withdrew from the globalist agenda years ago, or maybe just a couple of years ago, and they were chewed out for it, but kudos to them for sticking to their resolve, which they had every right to do, especially after seeing what it has turned the we'll just go along with the globalist countries into. So let's talk for a little bit about what this whole globalism idea is. As most of us still alive today were growing up, we were told that all the people in the world are the same. This is the story that has been told to Western children since, well, the 1960s, really, when the baby boomers of the first post-World War II generation attempted to bring about a mindset of peace, love, all of us brothers and sisters. And so much of this has roots in the hippie movements of when our grandparents were teenagers and young adults. My parents had their kids particularly late. So for me, it was my parents rather than grandparents. Although my grandparents are completely on board with them, which is interesting. They came from a more conservative and responsible generation, but I don't know, maybe it's just old age, them wanting everyone to get along. However unrealistic that might be, actually only one of my grandparents is still alive, but a little beside the point. Almost my entire family is leftist, apart from my dad and younger brother, who are beginning to really see the depths of corruption in the leftist agenda. They're not quite where I am yet, but I think they're getting there. Okay. So kids these days, and people who were kids as far back as the 1970s, grew up being taught that the only differences between all the peoples of this world were just superficial. A few details of skin color, cultural beliefs, practices, foods they made, clothes they wore, but inside everyone was the same. There are no differences that a little bit of tolerance can't overcome. That's what mentors from our parents to our teachers as far back as preschool and kindergarten, and then our university's professors said, which a lot of university professors still say. But the core problem was, or one of the core problems, tolerance was only asked of from white English-speaking people. It was never hammered into children of any other color or background anywhere close to as much. Why is this relevant? Well, the whole globalist platform, just like that of the leftists, well, everyone pushing for open borders and open migration, is that to oppose it is racist, along with every variation of the world phobic that they can come up with. Did I say world? Word. Right, you've all heard the transphobia, Islamophobia, yada 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 phobia, homophobia, yada yada, even though a lot of these people from the third world, particularly Islamic countries, are the least tolerant of those different sexual orientation. Oh boy, this is such a mess. But since calling people those names, those racist and phobic and everything under the sun they can come up with to slander you, the names have been so overused past the point where it no longer means anything other than, you're not giving us what you want, so we'll just call your names and destroy your life, like the subterranean level that most of these debate losers sink to. The people have actually become sick and tired of it. And I think I've made this point before. They're not becoming sick and tired of it. They've been sick and tired of it for quite a while. I'm completely exasperated with it. I'm actually pretty angry. A lot of people justifiably now very furious. And many on a national level are retaliating by going more adversarial towards open borders, particularly in Europe, as Muslim migrants have raped their way across Europe, with the police in countries like the United Kingdom and Sweden not doing a damn thing to save their own people's children from the invaders. And in the United States, where a gigantic invasion coming up from Central America posed a very real and very visible threat to their safety and sovereignty. Still does, because the issue is by no means over. So the globalists now seek to just force it onto the people through international compact. It's disgusting. Yes, and it's happening. And we need to stop it in its tracks. That is where I need to stop for tonight. I do have more research to do, and I have more things to prepare for this week. Tomorrow, if I have the time, I will write up and finally space on my computer, I will put together a short presentation on the Alaskan earthquakes, because I'm still looking to have a career in geology and ecology, although it looks like dealing with world disaster after world disaster just thrown at us is becoming many of our primary focuses. But I will see what I can do. I do have more to say on this. Contact the people you can, whatever people in government, whatever UN representatives you can, tell them to pull out of this compact. I know it's something that I know they almost never listen to people. We have to try anyway. We have to give it our all. So I will return maybe tomorrow, maybe later in the week, with more to talk about. Till then, this is Kesseratorial, and I hope to not be gone for too long.